Hi, I'm Anna McKerrow. This is my Magical People series, and today I'm here with Nimue. Would you like to introduce yourself, Nimue?
Hello. So yeah, I'm Nimue Brown. I'm in Gloucestershire in the UK, which I, in a fit of enthusiasm in a previous interview, once explained to people not in the UK is like if Cromwell is the leg, we're in the groin here.
In the groin.
We're the groin of the UK. No, it's a lovely part of the world. Limestone hills and the Severn River, which are very important to me. And yeah, I've been here most of my life, apart from a brief foray into the Midlands, which I'm not sure I can recommend. Didn't work for me.
Yeah, lovely. And and how would you characterize your magical practice, Nimue?
I'm very drawn to Bardic magic as a thing to explore. I came to Druidry through folklore and folk music about 20 years ago, nearly. Slightly frightening, but the Bard path is sort of held within the Druid path, and it's all about the magic of inspiration, working with inspiration, and how you can change things for other people through creativity. And that can be about ritual, that can be about poetry and song, it can be about story writing. There's all kinds of, anywhere that you can bring your inspiration, it's pertinent. So pretty much any aspect of life can be touched by it, really.
And so, and you are a writer, and tell us about that as well.
Oh, well, I mean, I've always written pretty much as soon as anybody put a pencil in my hand. I was scribbling illegibly and with great enthusiasm. I have tried my hand at most things at this point. I write a lot of poetry. I blog. I've got some non-fiction druid and pagan titles. I do graphic novel series with my husband. That's Hopeless Maine, and I also colour on that. I've got a ridiculous fiction series on YouTube at the moment called Wherefore, which I put up once or twice a week in little bites. It's sort of a bizarre supernatural soap opera. I get bored easily, so I range about a fair bit. Keeps me out of mischief.
Awesome. God, yeah, what keeps you very busy as well? All of that, I would say. Yeah, and you're a reviewer as well, aren't you?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. You've been known to do that. Okay, so sorry, I was just kind of asking that because that to me seems like obviously that meshes in particularly with that bardic tradition you were talking about. So for those people who are watching who may have heard of Druidry, but they're maybe imagining something out of a film or something like The Wicker Man, perhaps.
Yeah.
I personally love The Wicker Man, and he gets what's coming to him in the end, in my view. So anyway.
I love Wicker Man. I've built and burnt 7 Wicker Men, not in a while, but yeah.
Nothing wrong with a good Wicker Man.
But
can you tell us sort of just generally about Druidry as well? So what are some of the overall beliefs there, and how does that work?
It's a classic case of ask 3 druids, get 4 answers.
Yeah.
But Druidry at the moment is very much a modern tradition that takes inspiration from what little we know about historical Druidry. There was a big revival period, which when I'm feeling less serious, I am inclined to say that people who can get into the Freemasons and wanted their own kind of ridiculous regalia founded some amazing characters in the revival Druidry. They're all mad and wonderful. There are 3 different kind of historical forms of Druidry that all emerge together and sometimes involve the same people. There's the Welsh Eisteddfod movement, which is all about Welsh language and culture. There's the spiritual side of it, and there's also kind of a friendly society aspect, and all of those are still going and sometimes overlap, which can be entertaining at times and causes great confusion. So you get a lot of people who turn up a photograph and a medal and go, my God, my great grandfather was a druid. What does this mean? And it turns out that great grandfather was in a friendly society or in a cultural and had never been anywhere near Stonehenge at all.
Okay. That's given me a bizarre memory. Am I right in thinking that Winston Churchill was a druid? Yep. So what bit was he then? Was he in the?
Yeah, not spiritual druidry.
Hmm.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But yeah,
No.
one of the other bits. But that causes a lot of confusion. Ronald Hutton is the man to read if anyone wants to get into this. Blood and Mistletoe is a hefty volume, but it's got all of the historical stuff in it. It's really fascinating and quite funny. So
Yeah, he's a great writer as well. I recommend.
wonderful book.
Of the,
Yeah.
I have not read that one, but I've read the Triumph of the Moon, and which is so interesting, and
Mm.
a couple of other ones. One about King Arthur, um, which is great. Um, and I think he tends to get recommended quite frequently, doesn't he? But certainly when I've talked to other people, he's always good. Yeah, no, I remember the only reason I know that about Winston Churchill is I was in a pub in Newquay, and there's like a bit as well, hotel actually, but the pub part, and there was a photo on the wall of Winston Churchill in
In the kit.
the Druid, and at the time my friends and I were like, oh, what was that? So I can only presume that's the sort of as you say, kind of maybe the cultural, historical
Yeah.
something side.
Yeah, it's one
Interesting.
of the other bits.
Yeah. And so for the spiritual side of things nowadays, am I right in thinking that it's the order of bards, ovates, and druids who is
Well, they're the major teaching organisation in the
mhm,
UK, so they're a great place to start for anyone
mhm,
who's looking to learn. And their website's fab. I did the 3 grades with them. I worked as a mentor for them for a little while, which was an amazing privilege to spend time helping people find their way. Yeah,
mm,
great outfit. There's a lot of other orders. Some more long lasting than others. You get the odd ancient order of druids from the whole historical stuff, which I find very entertaining. Yeah, so spiritually, it's a really diverse thing because you can get atheist druids and Christian druids, polytheist druids, really hard polytheist druids. Some druids are animists, some druids aren't. Some druids are agnostic, and you can all end up in a circle together
mhm.
and it works, which is, I think, perhaps the most exciting thing, that what the druid next to you believes is not necessarily that critical to whether or not you can rock up together and celebrate and connect in a meaningful way. So I
Mm.
really like that. I like the diversity.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that that's really appealing, and it would be very appealing, particularly in sort of a modern secular context that
Mm.
we live in now. Um, and so, I mean, from I know some things about Druidry, but not a tremendous amount. So I know that it's very nature reverent practice. But what are some kind of typical Druidy type things that one might do?
Oh, well, I mean, again, it depends a great deal on who you're working with.
Mm.
There's a lot of diversity out there, but one of my pet favorites is the Bardic Picnic, where you get out in the sun with whatever goodies that you've made. You bring your made bread and your cakes and all the rest of it, and then you share stories and poems and whatever creativity people want to bring. That's a good bit of druidry for my money.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
great way to spend an afternoon. And we do ritual in more formal and structured ways, and from the whole everybody in white standing about in a very scripted way through to a bunch of muddy anarchists in a wood in the middle of the night and all places in between. So
There's
yeah.
the Wicker Man again.
Oh yes, yes, and sometimes Wickerman.
Yeah, I know. I've now like suddenly become obsessed with the idea of the whole thing. Um, Okay, excellent. And is it, so I'm going to ask you loads of Druidry questions now because I think people will be really fascinated to know. And I think also it's a path that appeals to lots of people, partly because what you said about being kind of very inclusive and welcoming and fit into it in a variety of different ways, but also the nature element of it, And also, as far as I'm aware, that you could do a kind of a correspondence course at your own speed and all of those things. It's quite accessible.
Yes.
Um, so, I mean, are the festival? I think that there are kind of natural festivals in the year, but they're not necessarily called the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, people use all sorts of different names for them, and again, it depends on who you're talking to. The same sort of 8 festival wheel of the year thing that is so broadly popular across British paganism. Certainly, Druids tend to celebrate those. It's not a coincidence. The guy who founded Obod was actually quite chummy with Gerald Gardner, by all accounts, and this is why we have the same festivals. It's not
Okay, right.
But you know, there are druids who celebrate dark moons, and there are druids who celebrate full moons, and you know, honestly, anything that can be celebrated is generally fair game. So whatever makes sense, really.
Yeah, I'm getting a very clear message, and I think everyone watching will be, that this is a very joyful and perhaps what's the word I'm looking for, is that often an opportunity for a party and perhaps a few
It
drinks.
can be.
Yeah.
It can be. I mean, you know, I refer you to Paul Mitchell's song about being a much better pagan when inebriated, although that's not how he phrases it. There's a certain truth in that. And I think the celebratory and the joyful aspect of it is really important, that Druid spaces are often very family friendly, that, you know, if you're meeting in the afternoon in a public place, as a lot of Druids will, that it's reasonable and practical to take children along. And my son went to rituals with me. Well, he's always done rituals with me, and it's been fine to include children. It doesn't tend to have content in it that isn't inherently child friendly. Obviously you can, and some groups will choose to work in more nighttime, secretive, intensive, deity orientated, don't bring the kids because we're going to do some deep stuff kinds of ways, and there's room for that too. But honestly, the community side is, I think, what has most attracted me on the ritual front. I like ritualist community celebration much more than I wanted as an expression of kind of personal spiritual journey, if that makes sense. I like celebrating the wheel of the year, and that's good and fun. And I think we need more stuff that's just uplifting and heartwarming a lot of the time.
That's so lovely, and yeah, that's so true. And particularly for those that aren't already in a spiritual or religious tradition where, you know, you have existing festivals, that's quite appealing, isn't it? Because there's something nice about celebrating the natural turns of the year at different times. And, you know, sometimes you're thinking about fruition and all of those things. Sometimes you're thinking about getting quieter, and it kind of, I think that actually helps your mental health to some degree. It kind of feels like you're being a part of the natural rhythms, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And one of the things that Druid groups will often do is provide public ritual. So things that happen at Avebury are a quite typical example of that. But while some meetings may be sort of very closely held for the group members, a lot of groups will do things where you don't have to be a druid to turn up. You can just come along and join in and celebrate. And I was involved in a lot of those during my Midlands period. And yeah, it's a really lovely thing to do, and not to require people to make big commitments, because not everybody can. I mean, it's wonderful if you can be really deeply involved in a working group, but for a lot of people, realities of work and family and all the rest of it, it's impossible. But it's nice to have somewhere to go at midsummer maybe, or whichever, you know, seasonal festival particularly speaks to you. So again, it's an aspect of Druidry I really like. I think it's a public service to just make it okay for people to show up and not have to have qualified in any particular way. I think we need those spaces.
Yeah, that is really lovely, I think. And yeah, it's providing something that often isn't there otherwise. I remember as a teen actually being in Avebury and happening upon a druidic ritual, you know, an open one happening in the stones in front of a little chapel church. And just, I don't know how old I was, probably about 17 or something at the time. That's one of my first memories of Avebury. It was a good memory. I'm very fond of that place. And I was going to ask you, Nimue, while we're talking about Druidry, and I hope you don't mind me firing all these questions at you, but like, tell us a bit about Druidry's history and like the problem with, so as I understand it, again, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it being an oral tradition back in, you know, a long time ago. There doesn't tend to be too many written accounts or records of old practices.
That's the one. The written accounts we have from the period when the Druids were active are Roman, and they weren't exactly pro the Celts. So this is technically problematic in terms of what you can trust, if anything. So we only have tiny, tantalizing fragments anyway. The meeting in groves, the golden sickle, and the cutting the mistletoe, and this kind of thing comes from the Romans, and the Wicker Men for that matter. I can tell you that your chances of killing an unwilling sacrifice in a Wicker Man are really small, because the technicalities.
I tried it, it doesn't work.
I won't say anything too incriminating, but my experience of getting something that will stand up, you know, the bigger they are, the easier they fall over, at which point, you know, they've gone. You could not kill an unwilling sacrifice in a Wicker Man, and that is a hill I'm prepared to die on. It's not technically possible. Roman propaganda, definitely a thing, which is, it's difficult to pick out from what tiny fragments we have what might be pertinent. And then you get this fascinating process where Christian monks were recording older stories. So we've got this amazing body of material that was recorded into sort of the medieval times. I'm rubbish at dates, so I apologise for that. But this isn't hard to track down for anyone. Read Ronald Hutton. But there's this amazing body of literature, some of which is almost certainly incredibly ancient and full of ancestral wisdom. And academic friends have said this is definitely a thing. Some of this stuff is really old, but we don't know which bits. We don't know what's evolved, and we don't know what's been changed by the people who were writing it down, because they obviously had a perspective. So, for example, there's this amazing body of Welsh literature, of mythology, and by the time it comes to us, they're kind of superhuman characters. But for a lot of contemporary Druids, there's a feeling that surely these are gods and goddesses. So figures like Blodeuwedd and Rhiannon and Branwen, who are reverenced by contemporary pagans as goddesses, are in the key literature. They're not really. And there's this interesting sort of tension between these amazing stories and how they make people feel and what you do with them. But the kind of the literary evidence isn't quite there to back it up. There are lots of people doing all kinds of work poking around in this. I know there's work being done on all sorts of deepening of understandings, or how we might read this differently, but I haven't really dug in there. I'm glad people are doing it. I think that's wonderful. But these are stories that I grew up with. I was exposed to sort of Welsh mythology via Alan Garner's The Owl Service was my entry point, which took me to the Mabinogion stories and to Blodeuwedd. And that feeling of as a child of significance and something much bigger than the Alan Garner book captured. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I started finding it wasn't just me. And I had an amazing experience at the Clun Green Man Festival of sitting down in a church to listen to some guy who was apparently the bard. And he started singing about Blodeuwedd. And of course it was Dave the bard. And suddenly this world opened up to me. He was pretty much my introduction to Obod, and going, oh my gosh, there are people who think the way I do, which is just fantastic.
Oh, that's so lovely. When you were ready, the opening appeared. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Quite a moment.
And again, there's that link to fiction and kind of the creative muse and Druidry, and that, you know, kind of creativity is something quite holy and special, and but within us. And I really like that as a creative myself, and because I think that's certainly how I experience you know, writing, and well, predominantly writing. I mean, sometimes I paint a picture, but is that it's got a lot, difficult to describe, but it's really tied up with that kind of mystic experience sometimes.
Yeah, and that rush of inspiration is one of the purest and most exciting forms of magic I have ever encountered. And that moment where something suddenly makes sense or fits into place, or an entirely new thing happens in your mind that was never there before. That's just, yeah, that's yes.
Oh,
It's powerful and amazing, and something to court and search for all the time, really, for me.
so much so. I think about a lot also with writing in particular is when you've kind of created a world in whatever way in your story or your poem, it then exists in your mind. But then as soon as somebody else reads it, it then exists in their mind. And it then becomes this whole other thing, because then it becomes somewhere that you've kind of created, but other people go and visit, visualize in slightly different ways, which is itself a very magical concept, isn't it? Because then you've basically really fervently imagined this thing and sort of created it in the imagination sphere or the astral sphere or whatever you want to call it. And then it becomes like a destination for other people. And in some sense real. And you know, I don't really think it matters how many people. It might just be for one person, or it might be 100 or whatever. But that always blows my mind, and it continues to blow my mind as a thing.
Yes, that anyone who encounters what you make, it becomes a co-creator with you, and that they'll each make their own version of it that is not necessarily anything you would ever have imagined it would do. It's endlessly exciting and surprising. And yeah, I love that part of it. And on those rare and wonderful occasions when somebody comes back and says, "And I thought this."
Amazing. So nice, isn't it? No, that's kind of, from a literary point of view, like fan fiction is a very obvious thing. That, you know, that's what people are doing there, is taking a really usually quite well known canon or fictional world and kind of writing new things into it, or which is fascinating in itself. But that's a whole tangent. Okay, and so Nimue, what does like a normal day look like for you, and like in terms of life generally, but you know, from a magical point of view, are there certain things that you do on a daily basis? How does that work?
The most important thing for me is getting outside, but it depends on whether I'm physically up to it, and sometimes I'm not. At the moment, we're trying to walk in the early mornings because I love that part of the day, and there is a kitten who needs walking. He's a bit of a puppy kitten. He goes out on the lead.
Oh, it goes out. Oh my goodness! Wow.
Glorious. It's so cute. But
cute.
yeah, that process of getting out and encountering and experiencing and just being present and seeing what happens is fundamental for me when I can do it. But the cold messes me about rather. So
yeah.
bit limited,
yeah. And okay. I think it's so interesting how many people say something similar as well. Yeah, I know. So perhaps not a huge surprise. But still, it's important, and it's something. It's not obviously not restricted to people with a pagan outlook. You know, I think so many people do that, and unconsciously perhaps like to connect with nature, like to see the sun, see the moon. It always amuses me on Twitter when there's a full moon. Like normal Twitter, everyone will be like, "Look at the moon," posting pictures of the moon, things like this. Like people who are not pagan in any way, but they're just, you know, everyone loves the moon. It's for everyone. And so, what else do I want to ask you, Nimue? So many things. Is there, having talked a lot about things like OBOD and which is Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and things like that, is there a kind of a book or a website or a resource or more than one that you might recommend to people? Please talk about your own books here as well.
Yeah, I mean, the OBOD website's a really easy place to start. There's a huge wealth of material on there. The Druid Network also have a lot of online resources. I have a ridiculously enormous blog. I find if I'm Googling Druid topics these days, the probability of finding me instead.
Yeah, oh, there's me.
I do Druid life, and I post every day. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. So there's a ridiculous amount of
brilliant
material there. I heartily recommend Graham Tolboys for anyone who's starting out on the Druid path. He's got some really interesting ideas. He's got a couple of books out there. There's a big one and a small one, depending on what you prefer. But I think he's a great author to start with. But there's so much in the way of people writing and sharing and community spaces, particularly with the internet. So it's a case of poking around until you find something that feels resonant, because there's, as I said before, there's lots of different flavors, lots of different ways of doing it, lots of different clusters of druids doing similar and less similar things. So it's, yeah, wandering about until something goes, ooh, yes, this feels right, and then you found where you fit, and that's it rolls. Yeah. But people do tend to find where they fit. It's curious, the kind of coincidences and little droplets of magic that get into people's lives when they start looking. There's so many people have stories about the strange and glorious things that got them to the point of going, oh, I'm a druid. It's quite fun.
Yeah. Oh, I'm quite intrigued with what those might be now. Is that a kind of a case of synchronicities and, you know, that kind of stuff?
Mine started in earnest in a folk club when, out of the blue, a friend of mine said, sing us one of your druid songs. And I mean, I was consciously pagan at that point. I was going, what the hell do druids sing? I sang Kipling's Oak and Ash and Thorn, which turned out to be a pretty good call, and plenty of druids do in fact sing that. But the following week, I was, for the first time in my life, in a space that had druids in it, and I said, what do druids sing? And it sort of
interesting.
I ended up in the Grove as a direct consequence of that conversation. So
right,
yeah,
there you go.
It just all neatly lined up for me. And
meant to be. Meant to be. And I think also that it's good to ask questions, isn't it? It's good, you know, like I've been pounding you with questions, but you know, for people who kind of may be drawn to this kind of area but not quite sure, then also to try things out, and you'll know what you like and what you don't like, and that's good. You can, as you said, you can go along to open ceremonies, not just druidic, but you know, also sort of general pagan ones and things, should you want to. And you can find online forums, and you can chat to people that you might know or whatever, and you can, you know, find out quite a lot. That it's not how it used to be back in the old days.
I wrote a letter to the Pagan Federation many years ago. I don't know if you did that one, but back in the days when you had to write to had to approve you for membership and decide that you were okay.
Right.
And then they let you in and you talk to people. Back before the internet, when dinosaurs roamed the internet, it was crazy. But
wow, like a letter of application. Hello. I would like to be involved in some nature-based spirituality, please.
Yes.
And wow.
If you find it plausible enough, they'd write back to you. But,
wow.
Whole other world.
It's very different.
But yeah.
All for the good. I do remember, again as a teen, enrolling on a postal correspondence course with Vivian and Chris Crowley. They used to run a Wicca 101 thing, and doing that for a while. And that, you know, you kind of get it all paper based, send it off. Very good. But I imagine I wonder if that's still going. In fact, maybe they're maybe doing still a version of that. I don't know.
Probably online, everybody is.
Yeah, I know. I've actually been doing some through the lockdown, really good workshops and talks, which are all online with Treadwells at the moment. As a mention to anyone watching, that they've got a really great selection of stuff, and just very varied, all different types of pagan-y, occulty presenters, and so highly recommend that to people watching also while I think of it. Okay, and please just mention some of the titles of your own books, Nimue, as well.
Oh, well, I've got a Druidry and meditation book out there, Druidry and the Ancestors. There's a little Druidry in the Future book, which if you find me on Ko-fi, you can have as an ebook for free. You can just download it from there.
Okay.
I Google really well. Nimue not being too obvious a name, so it's pretty easy to find me and what I do. I've got all sorts of stuff out there all over the place. So
Okay, so if people want to find you, I'll put links underneath the video. So if people want to find you, is that ko-fi, that one, coffee?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got stuff in there.
So you're, what are you, Nimue Brown on that one?
Yes. Generally,
Okay.
most places I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
And the Druid Life blog is a good place to find me, and that's very easy to find.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Yeah, there'll be lots to read there. And so, yeah, I know that you have quite a few books. With Moon Books, I think you've published, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a handful of titles there. Some broader pagan ones, prayer and dreaming related. Yeah, a couple of druid titles, so all sorts.
Good. Okay. Well, very much recommend them to everyone watching. Oh, not at all. Well, thank you for coming to talk to me. It's been so nice and so interesting. And I think I could have asked you a lot more things, but I've probably asked enough for now. But maybe we'll do Druidry to the return at some point.
Oh, that could be fun.
The revenge.
The ovate strikes back.
Yeah. I like it. Definitely. All right. Well, for now, thank you very much, Nimue. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you.